Okay, calm down.
Our first half of the show is about the labor movement, and I'm very excited to be bringing on two guests. Ben Burgis is the host of the Give Them an Argument YouTube show, a columnist for Jacobin, and an adjunct philosophy professor at Rutgers. He writes at Philosophy for the People Substack every Sunday. Matt Leichenger is a UPS driver, an alternate shop steward in Teamsters Local 804, and a member of Teamsters for a Democratic Union. So let's bring onto the stage Matt and Ben. Hi, Matt. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Katie.
Hi. Thanks so much for joining. So, Ben, let's start with you. You have an article about the recent victory at Rutgers. Tell us what your relationship is with Rutgers and also what happened at Rutgers.
Sure. So I have been teaching at Rutgers on and off, mostly on, like all but 4 semesters this time, I think, since January 2016. And for a long time, that was my only job. I was living in New Jersey, and I was more or less a full-time adjunct, which is technically an oxymoron, but lots of people essentially do that. What that means is that you're that's like really your only job, and you're always kept at like just one class a year short of the line where if you went over that line, they would be contractually obligated to reclassify you as full-time and give you, much more money and health insurance and all that stuff. Rutgers, like many universities around the country and community colleges and, private colleges and universities, has been relying on adjuncts, on people who are just kind of hired on a class-by-class basis to teach more and more of their classes, which, of course, they like for the same reason that every employer likes, having a more precarious and lower paid, less secure labor force. And when I was still living in New Jersey, I was on the executive board of the part-time lecturers union at Rutgers for 2 years. I've just been since 2021. I've just been a rank and file member, but I have still, even as I've been doing other things with most of my time, writing and podcasting, all of that, I've still been teaching part-time, now it's just like a class or two a semester for Rutgers. And so I was, on strike a month ago for a week, which, is what the article is about. And I should say, like, the strike was a month ago, but we just wrapped up voting on the new contract yesterday.
A great article, but tell people kind of the thesis of the article.
Like, the thesis of the article is that this is an important demonstration of what can be accomplished by kind of, holding strong and disrupting, universities in this way. That, the adjunct union at Rutgers is relatively well established, but adjunct unionization most other places is a very new phenomenon. So you can be pretty sure that both labor and management at other colleges and universities around the country are going to be watching this pretty carefully. We're watching this pretty carefully to see what happened. And the result, I think, is really encouraging. That this, no contract, of course, is perfect. But this one is a big step in the right direction. That there's so. All 3 of the faculty unions at Rutgers were on strike, so that's one for like full-time professors and grad students, and one for part-time lecturers, and then there's one that's like the med school basically, and everybody got significant gains out of the contract. I mean, just to focus on the aspect of it that I know best, adjuncts at Rutgers actually got a 43.7% pay increase over the life of the contract. And some of that's actually retroactive because we've been working for over a year without a contract, about a year without a contract by the time the strike happened. And, that's like a year of Rutgers dragging its feet at the table. And also the president of Rutgers, Jonathan Holloway, who's somebody who likes to think of himself as a very progressive person. He's like a, scholar of like the history of racism and all this stuff, is was actually making legal threats about retaliation if we went on strike, because he said that public sector strikes are illegal in New Jersey, which isn't really true. There have been injunctions sometimes in the past made by judges, but, show me the law that says that public sector strikes are against the law, law in New Jersey. There isn't one. But, he'd been saying it was illegal and that he was going to get an injunction and all of this. But over the course of just a week, got these, there was some more bargaining after we came back, but got the sort of basics of the contract locked down in this tentative framework. And I think it's a really remarkable victory that happened over the course of just this week that we were on strike at Rutgers. And I think it's an encouraging thing because kind of broadening out the view from just Rutgers or even just colleges, even just the college context specifically, in a much more general context. I think that the adjunctification of universities is just one small part of some much bigger changes in the structure of American capitalism. You could also talk about, the replacement of unionized cab drivers with ultra precarious Uber drivers, and a lot of other familiar examples of this. And the only way to turn any of this around is with all kinds of unrest happening in every sector of the economy. And I think in particular that what thinking about this case, or thinking about what I know you're going to talk about soon about the screenwriters, I think really brings home is that these sort of trends towards increasing precarity and worker powerlessness that can be reversed in this way are things that impact every sector of the economy. And there's all this really unhelpful stuff that's sort of floating around. Some of it's even among people who think themselves as leftists. I think a lot of it's just sort of people who are sort of would think of themselves kind of vaguely populist about how, if you're talking about adjunct professors, you're talking about screenwriters, you're talking about this sort of privileged, something other than the working class that, that people, I've seen people use phrases like the laptop class, or, the professional managerial class, which is, I think, a phrase that has some legitimate meaning, but also just because you went to college or you have a job that, you might be tempted to think of as a profession doesn't actually mean you exercise any managerial authority. And I think all of this stuff is incredibly unhelpful. I think that workers organizing, going on strike anywhere is helpful everywhere.
Right. And we're going to talk more about that, about the claim that there is a kind of division between laptop workers and workers. So let's bring on, you're here, but let's unmute Matt Leichenger. Matt, tell us about what is happening with the Teamsters, with UPS workers right now.
So right now, the Teamsters, UPS, those national and supplement agreements are going through negotiations right now. So every 5 years, we have a 5-year contract. And so the contract expires on July 31st of this summer. And so we've just wrapped up the supplemental negotiations and are starting to move into national negotiations for the contract. The contract, there's a national agreement that covers all roughly 350,000 UPS Teamsters. And then based on regions or locals, there's supplemental agreements. And so right now, all of that's getting negotiated. And this is in the midst of, or shortly after an election of a new Teamsters leadership after about 23 years of Jimmy Hoffa, the old famous, infamous Teamster leader. His son was president of our union for 23 years, and there was a big reform effort. He retired, but there was basically another slate that he kind of endorsed, and there was a big movement to elect this new leadership under Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters United slate, which was endorsed by TDU, Teamsters for a Democratic Union. And so this negotiation is also the first contract that the Teamsters United slate is going to be negotiating. And a lot of the issues that are coming up in this negotiation are some of the issues that the leadership actually campaigned on because one of the big issues is this like two-tier driver position, the 22-4s. It was actually something that the union, not the membership actually voted against it, but Hoffa used this archaic bylaw, the 2/3 rule, to force this contract on the membership. And so it was a seriously unpopular decision made by Hoffa at that time, and it was a real kind of catalyst for change. And so we're in the midst of this, hopefully it'll be a really strong contract that we'll get out of it, and it'll be like a revitalizing thing, not only for the Teamsters Union, but then also for just like the labor movement in general.
And you're someone, we actually have some photos, Brad. Maybe you can, I texted you a photo of Matt on the picket line with the WGA workers. We can show that at some point during this interview. But you've been on the picket line with, here we go. There you are on the picket line with the Writers Guild. Why? What makes this strike important for you? And this also speaks to what Ben was just alluding to. I just want to quote something in Ben's article and then ask you to respond to it. Ben writes, some self-described populists or even socialists seem to feel a perverse need to deny this commonality of interest. Screenwriters and adjunct professors are dismissed as part of a laptop class that has little in common with real, quote unquote, real workers, a category supposedly limited to typically sturdy lunch bucket men doing tangible labor. But that's just a divide and conquer tactic, wittingly or unwittingly deployed on behalf of the employing class. And then he goes on, if it's true enough that some jobs are done on laptops and some have to be done in person and that the ability to work from home is a real privilege, it's also true that membership in the laptop class is no guarantee of a more privileged position overall than a worker who has to punch a time clock at a job site. And then he goes on, class is defined not by your relationship to your computer, but by your relationship to objective economic structures. Do you own your business or do you have to sell your labor time to someone who does? Do you give orders or just follow them? So how do you see this relationship between, for instance, UPS drivers and screenwriters?
Yeah, I mean, I think that distinction is totally correct. I mean, when you're talking, I think it's important to make this distinction between, like a capitalist class or an asset class, people who own the means of production versus, people who have to work for a wage for a living. That's a pretty, I think, basic and abstract way of looking at it. Something that really connected to me while I was on the picket line this past Friday in talking to one of the members of the guild was the fact that what they're fighting for is it's against like the gigification of their work, the increasing precarity of it, and also they're dealing with sort of the consequences that the new like streaming economy has really kind of like forced upon them, which really boomed during the pandemic. I mean, streaming existed before the pandemic, but because the pandemic sent so many people to work from home or stay at home, a lot of people were consuming all types of things just from home, whether that be movies, TV shows, and then also all the things that I was delivering, that Amazon workers were delivering, FedEx workers were delivering. And so during the pandemic, there were changes that were happening in the economy. Next day delivery, people expected and needed things to arrive immediately. And the same thing was true of the content that they were like consuming on Netflix or HBO or whatever it is. And so during the pandemic, and it not only during the pandemic, but even continuing now, bosses, kind of like took advantage of that demand and started squeezing workers, whether that be, workers in the entertainment industry, whether it be UPS drivers, Amazon workers. Bosses saw that, they saw the demand, and they went hard and they started squeezing workers for as much production as possible. And while they were doing that, they also tried to, get enough leverage over them to chisel away at whatever kind of protections or conditions they had won over time. And so it's, increasing flexibility, precarity, gigification that we're seeing across like the economy, that the capitalist class is basically trying to make the norm. And so even though like the work that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis looks a lot different than the work that a writer would do, the fact that they're fighting against this precarity, the fact that they're organizing and fighting for conditions that are fair in this new kind of economy, it just translates so well into sort of what we're doing. And obviously, like if we're going to support them on the picket line and saying, wow, I really connect with that struggle, and talking to them about how, as a UPS driver, I connect with that struggle, we're hoping that, you know, in the same way they'll see that and they'll be like, wow, so if we go on strike, they're going to be encouraged to support us too. And this is how you build a working class movement. This is how you build a strong labor movement where people are saying, okay, just because we don't do the same job, work for the same company, are members of the same union, our interests are actually aligned. And there is another class, the capitalist class, the asset owning class, the people who own the means of production. They are the people who will do whatever they can to take what we have away from us so that they can keep it for themselves, right? And we have to recognize across all industries that we have more in common with these other people in these other industries than we do with the people who own the companies that we work for, right? We have a lot more in common with the writers than we do with the major shareholders at UPS, the CEO. So that's why I was there. That's why I was really happy to be there. And honestly, it's been really exciting to see that movement, especially also Teamsters, are Teamsters in the entertainment industry as well.
Right.
So that's another aspect of it that is pretty exciting. Actually, the Teamsters who drive the trucks onto the sets and stuff like that are much more deeply intertwined in this fight than like a UPSer would be.
And we're talking about the Writers Guild of America strike, which started May 2nd after negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers fell through. And we're going to be talking about this strike again next week with a screenwriter. But I wanted to make sure that we talked about the Rutgers strike, and also wanted to make sure that we pushed back against this idea. I don't think it's very popular, but we've been seeing it pop up, this kind of divide and conquer framing, which is that there are real workers who do certain jobs, and then there are other workers who do jobs that aren't as kind of blue collar, and therefore we somehow don't have to care about their labor rights, which I think is pretty ridiculous.